All right, everyone. We are back with you on a Saturday morning. It's kind of an interesting morning. I don't know if it knows what it wants to do outside today, but at least it's not cold anymore. So that's nice. We're blessed to have a guest this morning again. It's a guest. How long ago was it that we last had you, Kevin? This is Kevin Adams back, by the way, attorney at law. Defense attorney at that. And we're glad to have him back. He's always good to have some great information. And he's going to be speaking to us about his new book that he has entitled Falsely Accused, or Even If You Did It. That's the that's the catchy one. You know, do you notice any similarities in these two books? These are destined to be bestsellers.
There you go.
Or best givers, best givers, best free books. But anyway, I did notice that we yours is more red than black, mine is more black than red. But that's of course because I'm black and you're kind of red. But anyway,
I think what I think of when I see that headline. Bart Simpson said, "I didn't do it. Nobody saw me do it. You can't prove anything."
No, but seriously. This is a very, very good book, and we're going to get a little bit into the motivation and some of the things he discusses on. But anyway, Kevin, hey, thank you so much for coming back in, and thank you for sending me this book to look at. And you begin the book by dealing with the founding of our nation and what it was founded upon, essentially the right of every individual in America to representation, and basically the premise of innocence until proven guilty, but mainly the right to representation and a trial by jury. And I like that. I want to. This really stood out for me, and it says, for criminal defendant, the right to trial by jury is among the most valuable constitutional rights that we have, and is part of the protection of the doctrine of the separation of powers in the United States Constitution. The right to a trial by jury separates the power to bring criminals to justice in America. In the American justice system, the jurors are the finders of fact. And the right to trial by jury protects people from the awesome power of the government. So that is so good, because I know prior to the U.S. being established in Europe and in most other places, you went in front of some judges, and the judge basically sent him off with his head, or off to a debtor's prison. Or in fact, I've talked to the people before about this show Poldark that my wife, it was a PBS, one of these PBS Hallmark movies, or it was a series, and one of my favorites. It was just a wonderful series. But anyway, they would get these people, the poor, and if they offended what they called the betters, your betters, and if the rich, basically, if the rich didn't like someone, they want to get rid of them, they would just go to a judge, send them off to debtors, or if you owed them someone, they sent off to debtors prison, debtors jail, and the judge could just determine, off to prison with you. You had no jury, no right to a fair trial. And that's honestly what it was like. And it would have been that way here in America had we not fought a revolution and won and set up our own political system. So anyway, having said that, to me, that the book centers basically around that whole premise. But why don't you tell us, first of all, what inspired you to write this?
Oh, goodness sakes.
Oh, it might help if you had a microphone.
Here we go. You're on the court.
Oh, good. This is good.
Yeah.
Another first.
Welcome to the pre-show, folks.
Yeah.
We are just about to go live here in a couple of minutes.
Seconds out. You've just witnessed another first.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
All right.
All right. We're back to the show.
Well, I mean, I've thought about writing a book for years. And I've written things for years. I write things on my website and trying to explain to my clients how the system actually works. And so it just, seemed like a natural extension to gather up these things that I've been talking about, for the last 25 years and to put it in a book. The first thing I wrote was a pamphlet that I had actually printed up, a trifold pamphlet. It was called 10 Things Everybody Suspected of a Crime Should Know. And I would take this and I would give it out. To my clients in the jail, and I give them a couple extra and they'd pass it around.
Nice.
And then when I got a website, I put that on the website. And then years later, I Googled it. I was working my website and I Googled it, and it popped up on another lawyer's website. The lawyer had just taken it and put it on his website. And so I submitted something to Google and they took it off. But anyway, that was the thing. I mean, so much of the time I spend so much time trying to explain to people how the system actually works, because their view of the way the system works is not actually the way the system works. And, and honestly, some of the people that are the most difficult to explain it to are the people that have never been in trouble before.
Yes.
I mean, they've lived a nice middle class life. They don't get in trouble. Their son gets in trouble. And then it's like they can't understand or they can't believe that this system actually works this way. And you start trying to explain it to them, and some of them look at you like you're an idiot. Like this guy can't be telling us right. This system cannot be working the way that they say that it does. So that was really the thing. And I put it in the beginning, the first chapter. I just talk about it. In the introduction, that I wrote this for my clients and my clients' families to educate them.
And then, so because the book kind of evolves and the ending is a lot different from the beginning of the book, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But so how did the pieces come together? As you said, the beginning began as a pamphlet, but then how did it build? How did you end up building the pieces?
I mean, the first issue when I talk about in the second chapter, well, let me just start in the first chapter in the introduction. I give a little bit of what my experience is so people know that, I have the experience, something they could listen to. But then I address an issue that kind of, I guess, is a pet peeve of mine, is that the general public and a lot of people will look at me and those like me, as if that we're obstructionists and that we're stopping the criminal justice system from working the way that it's supposed to work. But those people are wrong.
Sure they are.
Okay. Because I'm in the United States Constitution. You know what I'm saying? I'm in the Sixth Amendment. Hey, your local prosecutors, your local judges, your local police officers, they're not in the Constitution. I'm in the Constitution. And that jury is in the Constitution, And our system is supposed to have barriers. Defense attorneys are supposed to stand between their client and the angry mob. They're supposed to stand between their client and the criminal justice system. So that was the first thing I just kind of wanted to address, which I did. But then the next biggest hurdle that you get with a lot of people is that people get so wrapped up focusing on the flaws of the criminal justice system and attacking people, not everybody, but some people, and attacking people within the system that they don't, it's counterproductive. And so I just felt like I don't want to be negative, and there's a lot of negative things I could have said that I didn't say, but I just wanted to get the people to this idea that, look, if you find yourself in the criminal justice system, yes, it is in fact a flawed system. It's a flawed system for the same reason that we need a criminal justice system to begin with, is because people are flawed. It's the sin nature of man. We're flawed. But if you focus on how the system is supposed to work, then you have a much better likelihood of receiving a good outcome or a positive outcome than you do if you focus on the flaws.
I'd like to ask you this. Rush Limbaugh, whom a lot of people don't realize how much of a pedigree in law he has. His father, his grandfather, in fact, I think his grandfather, uncles were on the Missouri Supreme Court. He said it this way, and I really want to get your reaction to it. He said, when we set up our criminal justice system, it was with the mindset we'd rather see 5 innocent men or guilty men go free than an innocent man get convicted. What do you think? Or am I wrong on that quote? I don't know.
No, the quote actually comes from, and I think it's 100 guilty men versus 1 innocent man. Could be 10, but
Okay.
And it comes from one of the founding fathers, which I ought to be able
Maybe the Federalist
Yeah,
Papers or
I
something.
mean, I probably ought to be able to tell you where it comes from, but it does come from it does come from one of the founding
So you've
fathers.
heard that several
Yeah.
times before.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. That's a question that sometimes I'll ask in jury selection.
Oh,
Okay, not quite that way, but it comes from that statement.
Mhm.
Is which is a greater injustice, for a guilty man to go free or for an innocent man to be convicted?
that'll tell
Okay.
you who they are. Yeah.
Well, because they're supposed to be deciding this beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly.
Okay, and if a person tells me that they're equal injustices,
Mhm.
then in my mind, that person is going to apply a preponderance of the evidence standard, which is a civil standard, instead of realizing just how serious it is when the government takes away one of the freedom of one of the citizens. So, but I crafted that question based on the whole.
Okay.
It's better to let
So-
some
Go
people
ahead.
go free.
How difficult is it?
Eddie, turn your mic on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. How difficult is it for you as a defense attorney? Because I've often, we've seen it in movies where you have the defense attorney because it is your duty, it is your calling, and you may know that the person is guilty of something. But even as it says here, falsely accused, or even if you did it, you still have a duty to defend that person. And so, and it's hard for us sometimes to understand, let's say, a child rapist or someone murder or mass murder or someone, that they get this defense attorney when we would like to just take them out and chop their head off or whatever. I mean, the firing squad is too good for them or whatever. But how hard is it for you, especially as a believer? Maybe it's easier as a believer because you believe in ultimate forgiveness or an ultimate reconciliation. But how difficult is that sometimes for you when you go home and that you're defending someone that in your heart either did it or probably did it, and you're here defending this person against someone prosecuting their case?
Yeah. I would say this. Our system is set up to have a jury of 12.
Mm-hmm.
If I start making the decision, I know the person's guilty, therefore I'm not going to represent them, then they have a jury of 1. Okay. And that's not the way the system is supposed to be set up.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, and I talk about this in the book in several contexts, several different contexts. Look, when you call somebody a bad guy, what you're actually saying, it's a comparison. You're saying, I'm good.
Yeah.
And he's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm good and he's bad, then whatever I can do to him is justifiable in my mind. And that's, part of and that's human nature. Okay. To be judgmental like that. I think the Bible refers to it as
It's not a virtue, though.
Yeah. Bible refers to it as being a respecter of persons, but that we treat differently based upon our assessment. But I mean, look, sometimes some clients are more difficult to represent than others. Okay. I've represented people that were guilty of murder. I knew they were guilty of murder. And I knew they were guilty while I was walking them in the process of walking them out the courtroom. And I knew that the state wasn't strong enough to stop me. Okay. But that's my job, is if you can't prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt to every element of every offense, they're supposed to go home. They're supposed to go free.
Okay, as believers, we know God is the ultimate judge, and they won't escape that.
Yeah.
We know that human judgment is going to be flawed.
Yeah. Well, Moses was a murderer. King David had a man killed to cover up the offense he had with his wife.
Yeah.
Okay. Paul cut a guy's ear off. We call that assault and battery with a deadly weapon. So, God uses broken people.
Yeah.
And so I'm not, sometimes, typically the people that are more, especially if you got a guy that's like, is remorseful. Okay. It's a lot easier to represent that guy or that lady than if you got a guy that, continues to think that they know more about the case than you and wants to tell you how to do everything. You got to like your client on some level or it will come across to the jury, and I can think of one client in particular that, sometimes you got to find something to like about them.
Yeah.
And I'm finally this one guy, I just decided what I really like about him is he's a really good criminal and he tries the best he can be to be a criminal. If you're going to do something, you might as well excel at it. You know what I'm saying? And this guy really, really excelled at it. But at least he's given it his all.
A couple of Billy Graham's associates were talking, they were waiting for him to get in the car after Crusade. And they're saying, Billy Graham, he could find something nice to say about anyone. I bet he could find something nice to say about the devil. So Billy gets in the car with them and they tell him. And they say, well, can you say something nice about the devil? And Billy Graham looks at him and says, he does his job.
Yeah.
Have you ever gotten to the point of turning down a case that you felt that you just can't in good conscience take that case? Have you ever gotten to that point?
I turn down cases all the time. I take a fraction of cases that people try to hire me on. And some people get really irritated. Well, what do you mean? You're saying, no, I'm not taking your case. It's not the case that I want. But generally it's because I'm not on the same page as the person.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll ask them, what do you hope that I can do for you?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that what they're hoping that I can accomplish I think there is a legal pathway to get there. And if not, I shouldn't be on the case. If they have unrealistic expectations or whatever like that, because you're just causing yourself problems.
Yeah. If you can't do your best, don't do it.
Right.
And then there was a murder case, but this might be more along the lines of what you were asking. Years ago, I told a judge in Tulsa that I would take a court-appointed case. And it was a death penalty case. And another lawyer who's now a prosecutor, actually, wanted me to work on the case with them. And I got the discovery, and I started reading the discovery, and it discussed how his grandmother had discovered her granddaughter that had been murdered. She was holding her in the hands and their arms when the IMSA people arrived. And I called the judge back up and said, hey, look, I know I told you I was going to take this case, but I'm not.
The conscience.
Well, it's conscience. But it's not just a conscience, because I have a very strong conscience. The thing is look, these cases damaged the lawyers.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of prosecutors, I think it does damage to them just as in a lot of officers. Now, I think what might do prosecutors more damage is that they're so judgmental. I think that's damaging to you. But the thing is look, I wasn't in a place where I felt like I could deal. I don't want to see those images in my mind. I don't want to see those pictures. I don't want to live with that on and on. You take a case, whether it's an appeal, whether it's a trial or something like that, I'm waking up in the middle of the night thinking about the case. It's just always going on. It's always going on in your mind. And it's like a fighter, like a boxer or something, they take a piece of you, and at some point, I've known defense attorneys that, one that was a federal public defender told me one time, he goes, yeah, I hit the wall about 5 years ago. He just got to the point where he just couldn't do it anymore.
So I believe we ought to term limit our DAs, because every day they're dealing with the worst among us. And I think long term, it takes a toll on their view of humanity.
Yeah.
I really think so. And I start seeing them picking on the poor who can't afford justice.
Yeah.
And, if you're up against an O.J. Simpson trial with 14 of the top lawyers, you're going to, one judge is sitting in her chamber. She says, yeah, and misdemeanors, we stack them deep and settle them cheap. But the felonies, they treat differently. And I just like, should there be a distinction?
Yeah, I don't know that I want the government stepping in and telling somebody when they can or cannot do it. Frankly, I'd rather deal with an old prosecutor than a young one.
That's a good point too.
Because they get, they get a little bit more reflection over the years and stuff. And most older prosecutors are a little easier, or quite a bit easier to deal with. I remember what a jerk I was when I got out of law school, as a defense attorney. And a lot of the prosecutors are, when you get a young prosecutor, they're really excited about being a prosecutor, and they're really ready to, to show everybody who they are, and they can be a little more unreasonable.
Can attorneys do both? I don't think some attorneys can do one. They're either going to be good at one or the other.
There are some that can do.
Gary Richardson, you and I both know.
Yeah, Gary Richardson. He was appointed by Reagan, United States Attorney for the Eastern District, and his son Chuck was prosecutor for Tulsa County. To me, it turns on whether or not they're actually a trial lawyer. Okay. A lot of the prosecutors aren't actually trial lawyers. The most important characteristic of a trial lawyer is the ability to see things from different perspectives, to predict with a reasonable degree of certainty how people from different points of view are going to feel about a particular set of facts. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they have a role, and it's, they see it this way, and they're just going to push that role, but they can't really predict how other people are going to feel about it. And if you can't do that, you're not a trial lawyer. And so there are some prosecutors who can make that, cross, but I would say most of them probably can. Yeah. Most of them I would classify as litigators.
Yeah.
The last about 10 pages, I guess, of the book, it's funny how the book begins and goes through this whole process. Then all of a sudden, in the last 10 pages or so, it almost turns into a Bible study.
Yeah.
And it's really quite interesting. And it's almost as though, I think you told us off air before we went on, that this is intended somewhat to give to clients or prospective clients or people even in prison. Yeah. To help them know what their rights are and what things to do and so forth. But it's almost like a witnessing tool as well. Yeah. Why don't you share some of the things like that caused you, first of all, what caused you to do that at the end, and why you would add that to, because when you first start, it's this kind of wonky dealing with history and the law, and it's important, the Constitution, and then all of a sudden, boom, it turns into a Bible study kind of.
Well, most of the guys in Oklahoma, as in most states, you're only entitled to an attorney on appeal, on direct appeal, your first appeal. You're not entitled after that in post-conviction. You're not entitled to federal habeas. Federal habeas is very complicated. You can only get the federal government to step in and fix a case, okay, if it is they make a determination that the court ignored clearly established law as established by the United States Supreme Court. Okay, it has to be a federal issue, can't be a state issue. The feds are not going to interpret state law for the state. Okay, yes. This is a separation of powers issue.
A good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing. And the other thing, or they have a reasonable determination of facts based upon the evidence presented. Okay, and that's what you call federal habeas 2254, state prisoner challenging the conviction in federal court. Now, that's the presumption if the state court addressed it properly. There's a lot of guys that have a lot of good issues, okay, that if they could get it into federal court under a decent and present it decently and preserve their record and preserve their issue, that they would, the feds would appoint them a lawyer. You know, I mean, there's been two death penalty cases from Oklahoma reversed this year. It's only April, or it's almost April. Okay, by the United States Supreme Court.
Wow.
And both of them went through the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals twice. There was a guy that I was doing a case. I won't go into the details, but I was working on a case, and one of the newspaper guys told me about this guy that had pled guilty to something that wasn't against the law, according to some unpublished opinions I'd come across. And I went down to the jail and told the guy and gave him these two cases. Like, look, this here says, you know, that what you pled guilty to wasn't a crime. And so the guy tried to withdraw his plea, denied. Appealed to the Court of Criminal Appeals, denied. Appealed to federal court and the local federal court, denied. Went to the 10th Circuit and they granted it. And he did it himself. Now, I gave him copies of the stuff and gave him a little direction, but I didn't represent him. 10th Circuit put my name in the opinion, you know, that I'd gone down there, which could be good or bad. So anyway, but let me get to the point. So that's, the book is mainly for my clients, their families, or people that are in trouble and they need help, and defendants. Okay. And I send a lot of the books into the prisons, okay, to help explain to them how to do it. And on the faith part of it, look, most people, I mean, the criminal justice, most of these guys, the criminal justice system's not going to work out well for them at all. You know what I'm saying? And like everybody, what they need is faith. And I tried to approach it from a standpoint when I got in here, explaining to them that, you know, God uses broken people, and you know, in hopes that, you know, I can inspire a few of them. I mean, I've seen a lot of clients over the years. I don't know if you guys know who Dixie Pebworth is. That there's a pastor at God's Shining Light. He became a pastor, or he gave his life to Christ in the Oklahoma County Jail after convicted by a jury. And he's a pastor at God's Shining Light, and he runs the Wings of Freedom program, and he helps a lot of people coming out of prison. My stepfather is a chaplain, you know, a volunteer chaplain at the jail. And then there's another. I sent a lot of Bibles into prisons, into the jails. Okay. But I don't have a nonprofit. I just buy the Bibles and send the Bibles. I couldn't deduct it. I thought about starting a nonprofit, you know, but I thought, what a hassle, you know. Yeah. Well, I put it in the last chapter of the book. I could deduct that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I could deduct that, but I just felt compelled to it. And the hope is after they listen to me explain to the criminal justice system, explain to things that they may have suspected or thought or recognized but didn't understand why, that they'll also listen to me about the Bible.
I got two comments, but before I do, I just want to say some of our ministry friends here in Tulsa especially, if God's speaking to your heart about helping facilitate that through a church or something, or talk to Kevin. I got 2 points I want to talk about. First of all, our mutual friend, Al Gerhardt, actually used to be a client of yours.
Yeah.
He mentions years ago, he saw a different Kevin than what he sees now.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about the change.
Well, you know, I was raised in a church, gave my life to Christ when I was young, like 5. And then, you know, and I talk about this at the beginning, just a little section. I felt like I needed to address it, you know, that I had the answer when I was young. And then I started looking for the truth out in the middle of the world. And then there was a time that in October, in the spring of 2019, when God started, like, you know, really moving in my life. And I had a friend of mine that I'd represented. He went to federal court. He went to federal prison. He sold some cocaine to an undercover, which will get you put in federal
That'll
prison
get you
almost every time. And he gave his life to Christ and actually had become a minister. And I had all these crazy ideas, and I was thinking, he kind of set me up really. And he said, I mean, it was God, but he said, I thought that, I told him I thought all these religions were the same,
Hmm.
And he says, you know what you ought to do? He says, you ought to read the Bible, and then you can compare them.
Okay.
So I got and I remember the day. It was May the 1st of 2019. I was driving there on Route 66, coming back from Claremore. We live in Verdigris, and I'd bought I had a James Earl Jones reads the Bible, with a big voice.
Yeah, I remember that. Uh-huh.
And it was on the 3rd chapter of Matthew, and where John the Baptist is saying, "Repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand." And I just remember he said, in my mind, I was like, there's that word again. Somebody's trying to make me do something I want to do.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden it was like, no, Kevin, you're wrong. It's not somebody trying to make you do something you want to do. It's just admitting that what you were doing is wrong.
Okay.
It's a mistake. And I broke right then. I
There
mean,
you
started crying, started sobbing. And it was a process later that whole day. And the next day I woke up and everything was different. And, I used to be so mean that my wife used to pray for me while I was asleep because I was too mean for her to pray for me while I was awake. You know what I'm saying? And
That's a good one.
It was true. And I tell you, even before the thing that happened to my friend, what had started it is we have a 9-year-old.
Okay.
And she, we were in the car one day, and she's an incredibly loving, sweet child, and very strong faith. And she was like 3.
Yeah.
Okay. And she said, about to turn 4, but she was talking. She goes, I love Harper. I love Hudson. I love Addie. I love Ari. I love Grandma. I love Grandpa. She goes, I love everybody. Well, instantly I kind of swelled up and said, look at me. How great I am. I got this loving child. And then it's like, it's not an audible voice, but it's God. It's a spirit talking.
It was louder than that.
Yeah. It says, no, Kevin, she's not loving because of you. She's loving in spite of you.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying?
Sam.
And so then I decide that, I'm going to be like, I'm going to be loving too, and I couldn't do it. Could not do it. And I started thinking, well, maybe I'm just getting a little too fast here. Maybe I just need to start by not being a jerk. You know what I'm saying? And
bite-sized pieces of Christianity.
I couldn't do that either. You know what I'm saying? And that kind of got me going. And then the incident, when I was listening to it, because it's the power of the Word of God when you hear it. And just like when you're having a problem, and this scripture will come to mind. You know what I'm saying? And it's bringing it up. But so anyway, that's started, and then I guess it was an accelerated course. Because I was a real strong, when I was young, I really did believe. But then it was like, I never finished the first point. My wife used to pray for me when I was asleep. And the next morning when I woke up and the whole world was different, was my wife's birthday. And I always kind of thought that had a meaning. But then 3 days later, my father, or 3 or 4 days later, my father had a heart attack, and his heart stopped in the St. John's in Sapulpa. They life flighted him over to the St. John's in Tulsa, and that was a whole incident. But basically, to sum it up, after 6 weeks, they were trying to put my father on hospice, and they were overdosing my morphine, because that's what they do on hospice. And they were trying to get me to agree to it, saying that we don't think, we don't feel, we don't believe that your father could ever get back to having a decent quality of life.
It's assisted suicide.
I said, that's not our choice. That's God's decision. Yeah. Anyway, I had to get an attorney. You might know the guy, Brian Crane.
Oh, yeah, I know Brian.
Okay.
Former senator.
Represented me and got me appointed emergency guardian.
There you go.
and went down there and made them pull it. They'd already started the morphine, made him pull him off the morphine.
Whoa.
And called the pastor at our church, this little Baptist church out there in Verdigris, and called my stepfather, who's a minister, and they came up. They both told me at the time that I can't make it until the evening. I was like, okay, well, whenever you can get here, because I called them both. And then they both independently on their own decided they had to go to the hospital. And they'd never met before, didn't have each other's phone number, and they both arrived about 30 seconds of each other. And we went in and prayed for my father. And the next day he was talking and eating eggs. And my father lived another 2.5 years.
There you go.
And there was litigation over the whole thing. And what I had found out is that 6 doctors had gotten together and decided that he wasn't going to make it through the night. And they were going to give enough morphine to make sure that he didn't. And he did. And in fact, one of those, and then a few weeks later, one of those doctors told me, she said, your father's dying. I was like, no, he's not. And she's like, no, he's dying. I said, look, my father's not dying. Okay. I just don't like the way you guys are treating him. And she says, look, if your father lives 3 months, it'll be a miracle. And I said, I'm glad you said that, because when it happens, I don't want to hear you denying it. Okay. Yep. And he lived another 2.5 years. And so he passed when he was in the VA hospital, or the VA home out in Claremont.
There's some, if I could, by the way, why don't you point that microphone straight at you? It's catching most of your words, but turn it down facing to your chin. There you go.
Okay.
You talked about how the federal government twice this year reversed some convictions, serious ones.
Yeah.
Those would have been already gone through the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. I remember having you come in. First time I met you, I was president of the Republican Assembly here in town. And we're looking over the judges on, and you particularly opposed one guy who ended up getting on Court of Criminal Appeals, said he handled the case where I represented Al Gerhardt.
Yeah.
That got thrown out as a clear violation of Al's constitutional rights involving the state senator. And that guy got on.
Yeah.
What's the guy's name? You don't want to say.
His name is James Rowan.
Rowan, okay.
I'm friends with him on Facebook.
I'll see what I can do about that.
Yeah.
But so I don't know how he voted on some of these, but we were fortunate this last election, for the first time in Oklahoma history, we, impeached and threw off the court a justice who's been there 40 some years.
Yeah.
So there's hope if we can educate the voters, and we see judges who are really screwing up like they did twice this year already.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the United States Supreme Court is not a liberal court.
No.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a rather conservative court. And it's interesting to see these, a judge at the district court level is going to have different concerns than the judge at the Court of Criminal Appeals level that's going to have at a federal district judge, that's going to have at a federal appellate court, that's going to have the United States Supreme Court. It's interesting for the different layers. But, the brilliance of the United States Constitution is the separation of powers.
Yeah.
And sometimes when, I guess I would say power hungry people don't like the separation of power.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And even if you had a president or somebody in a position of power that was very, that would do things exactly the way you wanted to, and everybody could agree with fair, you wouldn't want to give them unlimited power, because what about the next guy or the guy after that? Mm-hmm. Human nature tends towards tyranny, but if you had a guy that was a defense attorney like me that became a judge, which I never would, you would hope that they would change their perspective or what their goals were, and I've had some, I've seen some judges. One was on the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals, is actually now in the Supreme Court, was a state court prosecutor, and was very, very zealous. And when she first got on the bench, I was like, I don't know,
Mhm.
you know, but rose to the occasion and has been a very good judge,
Good.
you know, on all levels. So
Sure.
I guess I would say that, you know, just because somebody was like, I mean, look, you want a prosecutor to be hardcore zealous, you know, you want a defense attorney to be hardcore zealous.
Yeah, it's a role
okay?
they play, right?
Yeah, but then when they become a judge, you hope that they're, you know, they're
Temper.
yeah,
Right, balance that.
that they have it, that they understand the system, and frankly, your best trial judges for a defense attorney are former trial lawyers that were when they were prosecutors. Those, in my opinion, those are generally your best ones because they appreciate the jury trial system and they appreciate, you know, and they had the ability to try a case themselves and they understood how it worked.
Mhm.
You know, they generally make the best judges at the state court, at the state court level.
You know, that's one of the issues I have with many of our fellow Republicans. It's like I have a saying that our people have gone so far right that they've gone all the way around to the left. So by that I mean they take on the same personalities of the people on the left, but they want to use it for their own. So in other words, they want basically tyranny, but tyranny from the right. So we want our judges to come in and exact vengeance. You know, every ruling we make is going to turn everything upside down to make it right, to get things back in balance. And that's not how it's supposed to work. And so I'm not, so I have a hard time with that sometimes. There are certain issues that, yes, you can't compromise on.
Yeah.
But some of the things, it's not a compromise. It's just fair. I mean, it's just, that's the way it should be, you know, and we can't dig our heels in and say, it's got to be this way because we got to get those guys, you know, and it just drives me nuts sometimes when I see that attitude. And Dave and I mean, we fight a lot, but
only when he's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
but we do have that same understanding, that basic understanding on some of those things. Yeah. And but getting back to your situation, you know, it must be tough, you know, again, you know, you're a man of God and only a man of God, but a godly man. That's more important than being a man of God, I think. But in your position, because you get to meet unsavory characters, and on both sides, you meet unsavory characters that are being prosecuted, and sometimes the ones doing the prosecuting may be unsavory as well, and you've got to deal with both sides of it. And I can imagine that there was a period of time when I had a decision to make, go to law school and become a lawyer or become a missionary. Mm-hmm. And I think God saved me and sent me off to the mission field.
Yeah.
I often think that because I just don't know if, with my personality, I don't know if I could have done it.
I feel like it's an opportunity for me. I feel like God brings people to me that he wants me to help. You know, the second court-appointed case that I'd taken, and this is like in 2002, it was my second jury trial. Maybe not the second court-appointed case, but it was my second jury trial. I walk into the cell with this guy, and the guy looks at me and says, you know, God, I've been praying to God to send me somebody, and you're it. And I was like, yeah, whatever, buddy. You know, I mean, I was so full of myself from winning the first trial, you know. And at the end of the case, he's standing in the corner of 5th and Main, saying, you know, screaming, yelling, praise God, praise Jesus, you know. And this lawyer I know walked by and he looks at me and goes, I guess you guys won, huh? And I was so arrogant. And I said, yeah, I won, you know. And gave God no credit for it at all. You know, it was all me. But the thing is so, I mean, I do find it as an opportunity, you know, to witness to people. And, you know, for instance, David Ware.
Yeah.
he was in the Tulsa County Jail, and somebody he did not even know sent him a Bible.
Wow.
And he opened it up and he started reading it.
Yeah.
And I saw his investigator earlier this year, the investigator he has on the case, because these things go on for a long time. And the investigator, told me that, David still had his faith.
Mm.
And, so many people, they look at somebody who has done something like that, or accused of doing something like that, or has actually done it, and they think, well, they're such an awful person. There's no way that God could ever forgive, or God could ever love that person. You know what I'm saying? Unlike me.
God's not that big.
Yeah, unlike myself, where God could clearly love somebody like me.
Yeah.
And they just, they just resent it. It goes to that whole good guy, bad guy thing, And so, I mean, I'm hopeful. And, there's a statute that's not followed. I think it's Title 57, 100 and something. Okay. That says from 1910, that says that the state or county shall provide a Bible or a New Testament to every inmate that wants one. And now it's mainly churches it's mainly churches and ministry.
Gideon.
Gideon that do it. But you want somebody to arrest these people and to lock these people up. But look, we could go down here to Woodland Hills Mall and we could set up a table and we could pass out Bibles, and we'd probably have trouble getting rid of a case. Okay. People don't out in the world, they don't want them, but you go into a jail or a prison and those guys will take the Bibles.
Sure they will.
And they'll read them. Okay. And hopefully they continue to read them, and hopefully it makes that change. Because if a guy doesn't start to change in prison, he ain't going to change.
Right.
And you know what? God loves a hungry heart.
Yeah. Sometimes
God looks at that inmate as having a more pure heart, hungry for him, than the rest of us.
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to.
Well, let me just ask real quickly in the situation with David Ware. Last time we spoke, I think you were looking at, or he was looking at an appeal or anything. Where is that? Is he still looking at appeals, or is he through with his appeals? Or
oh no, he is. It's at the direct appeal level, and my understanding, it's all been submitted to the court. It's waiting on the Court of Criminal Appeals. After the Court of Criminal Appeals decide, if they do not reverse it, then he'll have an opportunity to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. Okay. And then if he loses that, then it would start the post-conviction process and then go into a federal habeas process and then back to the Supreme Court.
Would you explain for the people the word habeas?
Federal habeas under federal court, if you're a state prisoner that has a conviction in state court and it involves a federal constitutional right, generally, you can appeal it to the federal courts, complaining that the state court has ignored your federal constitutional rights or violated your federal constitutional rights.
You said reverse it. Isn't there also a procedural thing where you say, no, you didn't run the trial correctly, retry it?
Well, yeah.
It'd be a vacating it.
Yeah. So when you reverse a conviction, most frequently it's reversed and remanded, okay, for retrial. Okay. It is possible under certain circumstances to be reversed and remanded with instructions to dismiss. That's what happened in Al's case.
Yeah.
But like if you have a search and seizure issue where like they're not going to basically after this decision, they're not going to have a case.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that would never be on a case like David's. It would always be reversed with instructions for a retrial.
Yeah. You remember the judge that was dead set on his own jury instructions. In every case that got convicted had to be redone because of his.
Yeah. That was Hopper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Presumed not guilty.
So that was a procedural thing.
Yeah.
That didn't go to whether or not the evidence was proper.
Yeah. I talk about this a little bit in the book. Look, appeals are about process. Okay. An appeal is a process complaint. What you're doing is you're complaining that the process by which the jury reached its verdict was flawed. Now, a lot of people, the hardest thing they have to wrap their head around is after their loved one, them or their loved one gets convicted, is they want to keep re-arguing the jury's conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
The appellate court is not going to replace its opinion with the opinion of the jury. And frankly, we wouldn't want them to. I mean, from a defendant standpoint, you wouldn't want them to.
Yeah. With the rare exception, like Al's case, where you said, no, this was his constitutional right to do this.
Yeah, but you see, that was a process. That was a process problem. It wasn't that the jury reached the wrong factual conclusion. The judge is the judge of the law. The jurors are the finders of fact.
Gotcha.
Okay. And we're not challenging. And even if you're challenging not guilty, that no reasonable jury could have reached this conclusion. Okay. What you're actually saying is it's a legal problem. That's a legal problem because it's a complete absence of the evidence that was there. And
for an example, Trump being found guilty in New York City in that case where most of us are of the, I won't say no for a fact, but are of the opinion that that jury was totally tainted and did not find on fact. They just came up with this, with a lady, that couldn't remember when in 10 years it happened or what, exactly, and those type of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I referenced Trump's case in here a little bit, just in passing, but the thing that people don't understand about jury trials is they always look at these jury trials and they always talk about the evidence. Okay. The evidence. Look, a jury trial is a story war. It is storytelling in a hostile environment. I'm telling one story and the prosecutor's telling another. Okay. And while we're each doing whatever we can to mess up each other's stories. But at the end,
well put.
But at the end of the day, a jury trial is a criminal jury trial is a skirmish in the story war. I mean, in the culture war. It's a skirmish in a culture war most of the time. Look at O.J. Simpson. Okay. Most of the, the white people are upset. Most of the black people are dancing in the streets. Okay.
They totally turned it into a cultural war.
Look at George Floyd. Look at Trayvon Martin. Look at the Trump cases. They're dividing. If they're not skirmishes in the cultural war, then why do they divide along political and cultural lines? Because what you're doing here, and the amazing thing about the jury trial is you could take a trial. I mean, you could take average people. First of all, I'd rather be judged by the first 12 people walking down the street than any judge in the state of Oklahoma. Okay.
Wow.
And there's no offense from any of them, but it's just that when I'm picking a jury, the most important characteristic in picking that juror is how do they view the power structure and how does that relate to my case?
Yes.
And the system generally does not allow people into positions of power unless their ultimate loyalty is to the system itself, not necessarily what the system professes to believe. Okay. And it's the power structure that's bringing the charges against my client.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. And when you're picking a jury, well, when you're trying a jury as a defense attorney, what you're actually saying is, I think I can pick 12 people and tell them a story, and they're going to see the case closer to my point of view than they're going to see to your point of view.
Yeah.
And you need a different jury if you're representing a police officer accused of assaulting a protester than you do if you're representing a protester accused of assaulting a police officer. And if you don't understand that, you have no business representing people in front of on criminal charges in front of a jury because you're not a trial lawyer. It depends upon the type of jurors that you have. In fact, when you see these police corruption cases and they prosecute them, I would say that I've seen the most common mistake that you see from the prosecutors is they pick the same jury they would have if they weren't prosecuting a police officer. You know what I'm saying? You need to pick a defense jury, and that's the problem with a lot of these cases. It depends on how you present the case. If you want a conservative jury or a liberal jury, but I just love it that you could take a guy that doesn't even have a high school degree, doesn't have a high school diploma, and he could tell the most powerful law enforcement official in a county or a state or in the country, no, I don't think so. You know, I don't agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The principle, people have used the term jury nullification. Can you simplify that for most people?
Jury nullification is when the jurors do something, okay, that is contrary to the law that they were instructed. Instead of doing what the law says, reaching the conclusion the law says they should reach, they reached a conclusion that they want to reach. Now, look, Al's case was almost a jury nullification. Okay. It was free speech.
Yeah.
The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals ruled that it was free speech.
Yes.
Okay. But the judge on the case would not give us an instruction on free speech.
So he shut down your free speach in order to shut down Al's free speech.
Well, I mean, he would
in the court.
Yeah, he wouldn't instruct the jury on free speech, right? But the jury still felt like there was something wrong, you know, and so they convicted him, but they fined him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
no jail time.
Yeah. I mean, where do you come across a case where the jury said, I mean, they're basically saying, yeah, we think something's wrong, but we're going to convict him because this, you know, without the free speech, it met all the elements, you know? And I've had other cases where judges refused to give instructions that I believe was real clear in the law that they should have been given, but the jury acquitted the client anyway, you know, and they just, we're not doing that.
Yeah. By the way, just so you guys know, Al Gerhardt said to Senator, if you don't bring this bill up in committee, we're going to have to investigate why. We're going to dig into your business dealings, your family's business dealings. And that was said to be blackmail by the prosecutors, right?
Yeah, they charge him with blackmail and they charge him in violation of the Oklahoma Computer Crimes Act.
Yeah, which is process crime because of.
Yeah, and on Rowan's issue, I would say it probably had more to do with his boss.
David Prater.
Yeah, because Al had gotten an investigation started
on David Prater.
Yeah,
tit for tat going on.
And the opinion kind of describes Al that he's kind of I can't remember the word they
an
used.
Irritant. They said
irritant. Yeah.
You know that's his license plate right now. I told him, I said, you're the official, and so he went and got him license.
Yeah, if you keep sticking your thumb in the eyes of people of power, eventually those people will come after you.
Yeah.
Hey, I'd like to change the subject one more time real quick. So we had talked before, which I wasn't aware of, that you apparently drove one of the vehicles when Donald Trump was here back in 2020, I guess it was, or was it 20?
No, it was 2020.
It was 2020?
No. I'm sorry. Not 2020. 2016.
16. I'm sorry.
Was it 15? Well, it was the state fair, right?
No. Trump came to Tulsa at the Mabee Center on January the 20th, 2006.
Okay.
We remember that date.
Yeah. That was 1 year before.
That's right.
He got sworn in.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's right.
That's right.
And then about several weeks after that, he came back to Oklahoma City and the second time, and he had a rally there. And I drove his staff in the Secret Service detail, me and Brian Keating, which was Frank Keating's nephew.
Okay.
Because I think
Dan's
son.
Yeah.
Dan was an early supporter.
Yeah, it was an early. And so drove his stuff, drove Scavino. Well, Palin was with him when he came to Tulsa.
Sarah.
Yeah.
And so I had his bodyguard, Keith, the old former New York City cop. You know, he was in the passenger seat on the way there.
Yeah.
And then Palin went back separately. So Keith rode with Trump on the way back. And then drove Scavino, Michael Glassner, and some people I didn't even know.
It's fun.
Yeah.
I got to do this for Santorum's family. And the only thing the cop said is drive faster. We're going down 169 about 80 miles an hour. And they're saying faster.
Yeah. I got yelled at by a Secret Service guy in Oklahoma City because I was allowing too much space between me and the vehicle in front of me.
Yeah.
But they had like this, I don't know, it was a Denali or something. I mean, it was some fancy SUV. And if you got too close, it would stop automatically.
Oh, yeah.
I had that. Special.
And I'm afraid I'm going to run into somebody, Yeah. We met Rubio, me and Brian Keating, when he came to Oklahoma City. We're at the Will Rogers Airport up there, and they've got these private jet, like like, I guess it's like a private gate for rich people. You know what I'm saying? I've never been in one.
Private
You know what I'm saying?
aviation.
And so what happens is you're in there and they got like TVs and popcorn and, you know, it looked pretty nice. Real comfy chairs, a lot better than when you're sitting waiting to get on a plane. And every now and then somebody will walk in off the runway and they just landed in a private jet, you know? So we're waiting for Trump to arrive there. And we walked in, me and Brian walked in, and Rubio comes walking out of the bathroom, you know, because he had a rally up there at the same time. And we shook his hand, but we weren't that happy about it because, you know, at the time, him and Trump were fighting. Yeah, we were like hardcore, you know, supporting Trump, and now they're all friends. He had Chris Christie with him in Tulsa, and he had Stephen Miller that he got from Jeff Sessions. And Stephen Miller, I think, it just came over to Trump there in Oklahoma City.
You know, that's something that I always, every time he comes on, I talk about it to my wife, how Trump has taken his enemies and made them his staunchest allies. You know, you take Marco Rubio. I've never seen two guys that are more like-minded and work well together. And Ted Cruz is another one. That's how Dave and I met and got into it. When we first met, we were mortal enemies. About the whole the ORU stadium. And anyway, but and I mean, he viciously attacked both of them. You know, little Marco, and then Ted Cruz's father and his wife. Yet both of these guys were man enough to understand that they were in a battle, and they understood and learned that Trump, when you're in a battle with Trump, it's Katie bar the door. I mean, it's you know, there are no rules. I've talked about this before. You know, I grew up part of my youth in Philadelphia, and they have this thing. There's two types of fights. There's a fight, and then you call a fair one. And so when you start a fight with somebody, you have to yell fair one, because if you don't call fair one,
their big brother comes out.
there are no rules. And I learned that the hard way. I started against a 13-year-old. Next thing, I'm fighting against a 16-year-old. You know, and I'm 12.
Philadelphia,
and I'm 12. You know, and so I had to learn that pretty quickly. So Trump understands that from being in New York, that if you're in it to win it, you're in it to win it, and you do what it takes to win it. And so, but to me, it's so refreshing. I think Marco, of all of them, has learned so much, because when I see him doing these news interviews, he's amazing. I mean, he takes no guff. I mean, he's probably the best on these interviews that I've seen.
Well, it's interesting. I think about the Marco thing. I like J.D. Vance. I like J.D. Vance a lot. But people just say, like, oh, well, obviously J.D. Vance is going to inherit, you know, is going to be the heir apparent, I guess, of the Trump. I'm not so sure it's not going to be Rubio.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? And I think there's going to be a fight coming between those two, you know, for 2028, because both of them would be. I mean, I like our choices better than the Democrats.
Well,
is there a choice there?
Well, it lines up perfectly with the Obama situation. Who was his heir? It wasn't his Vice President Biden. It was his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. See, so it's the same thing.
Yeah, but they had a bench back then.
Yeah, I know.
Right now, you know, because right now it's Newsom. Newsom seems to be, or Kamala again.
Or Crockett.
Crockett.
What's her name? The black woman.
Oh,
AOC would be there before Crockett.
Yeah, I know.
And Walls is trying to make himself there, but
oh no, he is just disgusting. I mean, even to his own people, they don't like him, which we can get into here in a little bit. His latest thing you saw, where he had this big rally and he's skipping around the stage like he does, but he was talking about Tesla, and he was talking down, you know, basically applauding the vandalism of the Teslas
Yeah.
and the Tesla stock going down, 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 until it was pointed out that billions of dollars of the state pension fund is in Tesla. I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars are invested in Tesla. Then all of a sudden he comes out a couple of days later, oh, I was just kidding. Yeah, you don't kid like that. You don't kid like that. I mean, he is an idiot.
I say don't rule out is the sports broadcaster Stephen Smith.
Running for president?
Oh, he's talking about it.
Oh,
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephen.
No, the ones who are going to recap what I will now call the Clinton wing of the Democrat Party will be more moderate than this bunch that we've seen.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And it'll be Stephen Smith, and I think Newsom's trying to reposition himself that way. And what's his name? Fetterman? Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. He realized, he's smart enough to realize he's now in a purple state and he needs to be more like Joe Manchin.
Well, see, where they messed up is when, do you remember who was the other choice from Pennsylvania for vice president? Remember they had a choice between
Shapiro. Governor Shapiro. Yeah.
He was young, good looking, sharp, intelligent guy. And I'll tell you why I think this shows how stupid the whole party was, or the apparatus at the time. I think they didn't pick Shapiro specifically because he would have made Kamala look bad.
Yeah, that's it. That's a point.
I think that's right, because you don't want your vice presidential candidate looking smarter and more intelligent and more electable than your presidential candidate.
That's what happened with Lloyd Benson. He made Dukakis look bad. A lot of people thought Benson should have been top of the team.
Right.
This is an 88.
And so they picked what's his name out of Minnesota?
Yeah, Tim Walz.
Tim Walz. And mission was accomplished. He made Kamala look good. Big scandal
about to reveal itself. But corruption and involvement of the Chinese Communist Party in Minnesota. Get ready for it.
Okay.
The thing is
can't wait.
There's 80 million. They claim that Biden got 80 million villains. Okay. Okay.
Right.
And there's a lot of them that just didn't show back up the second election.
Yeah.
So if you had done something to get Biden more votes than what he was entitled to, okay, and you knew they weren't going to be there the second election, then why would you want against Trump? And you basically knew I can't beat him the second time because we don't have coronavirus going on where we can mail in a bunch of votes. Okay. Then why would you want to be the sacrificial lamb at that time? You're better off keeping your powder dry and then trying again when Trump's gone in 2028.
You know what I'd like to see? And by the way, they are passing a bill now that says all the ballots have to be in at the closing of the polls on election day. What I think we ought to do is secure. All right, has everybody got all the ballots collected? Once everybody say, okay, now start counting. Because this was a thing going back to 1960 with Mayor Daley in Chicago. They got to see what downstate did for the Republicans, so they knew how many votes they had to come up with.
Yeah.
And we saw that with Biden in 80. All of a sudden, 3 a.m. when they had supposed pipe leaks, water main breaks, and everything, all of a sudden, big dumps of hundreds of thousands of ballots.
Well, in came the rollerback suitcases.
Yes.
From underneath the tables.
Yeah.
And
You saw the same thing in 2024 in certain districks, congressional districts, especially.
California.
Gary Richardson and I and some other guys used to play poker. Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
And after the hand, one guy would, a guy would bet and the other guy would fold and say, well, what'd you have? And the joke was first liar doesn't stand a chance. You know what I'm saying? Because the guy said, I had 3 of a kind. The guy said, I had a full house. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of the same way, I guess, with the votes. You know what I'm saying? They want to slow it down to see how many votes they got to see what the number is that they got to beat.
It's clear corruption.
And yeah, I definitely think it's a problem.
Because what happened, it was 6 counties swung the election for Biden. Just 6 counties.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
but I think it's actually accrued to Trump's benefit. I think the 4 years off and everything they did to him and all that has done nothing but make him stronger.
I agree.
And I think it's exposed a lot of stuff that people otherwise would have never believed. In the new coalition that he's got between MAGA and Maha. And, I mean, I think it's strong.
I think you're right on.
I think it's strong.
Right on. All right. Should we wrap?
All right. Yes. Well, Kevin, thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming in. The book again for everyone out there. So if you've been falsely accused, and even if you're guilty, or even if you did it, I'm just paraphrasing. But and where can people get this? It's on Amazon.
It's on
and by Kevin Adams, if you don't remember the title, but Falsely Accused basically is the main title. And then Kevin Adams, you can get, and how much is it?
It's like $10.
$10. Oh yeah. So yeah.
I know you're doing podcasts and certain speaking events, any of them that you can speak publicly at that people can join or?
Yeah, I mean, mainly you guys are the only podcast I've ever done.
Is that right?
I'm saying, yeah, you guys are the only podcast I've ever done. I've get some emails every now and then, but I've never done. Yeah.
Well, and Kevin Adams is the common spelling, and it's falsely accused with a question mark. So when you go into your search query, do that, and it should pull right up.
Yeah.
And good. Any cases you're working on of note?
I mean, I've got a couple murder cases, but there's kind
just
of
a couple of murder cases.
By the way, you were telling us about last time you were in, you got this other case in eastern Oklahoma, but they locked up a victim and accused her of a murder where she was basically kidnapped and kept in a cage.
Yeah, well, we got that all straightened out. I was going to try the case. She was charged with murder. You know what I'm saying? She called the police. She was sobbing so hard, it took her 15 minutes to tell them their name. She did manage to get out that he was going to kill me. When the cops showed up, all she had was a Bible with a bullet hole in it. And he had all these cages and stuff around his property that certainly appeared like that they were there to lock up women.
Yeah.
And there were different bags of clothing that were like different sizes and stuff. And he actually, in this one room, it was a shed that he converted where you could lock somebody in there. On the wall, he had pictures of demons and stuff, and one of them said "F-U-C-K" or death above. Anyway, and it looked to me like the guy, But anyway, the neighbors heard her screaming for a couple hours before she called the police, and they were used to hearing the sounds of women's screams come from that place. So anyway, the state offered us not guilty by reason of mental illness. Because she spent some time in the mental hospital afterwards. It just like broke her.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah, it just like broke her. But anyway, we did end up taking that. And then so they come up with a treatment plan for the person. And the treatment plan was basically she had to live with her mother and check in with a mental health professional once a month. But we didn't believe the judge should have ordered continued supervision because of the requirements of the statute. So I appealed it to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. They assigned it to the Court of Civil Appeals, and the Court of Civil Appeals agreed with me. And so now she's completely free.
Okay.
Praise the Lord.
So she had a limited sort of probation kind of thing.
Yeah. It's interesting because once you're found not guilty by reason of mental illness, even though it's still under a criminal case, it becomes a civil matter.
Yeah.
And the issue is whether or not you have a history of noncompliance, okay, or whether you need continued supervision because of unresolved mental health conditions. She had no history of noncompliance, and the doctors said that it was a one-time schizophrenic event, and they basically cut her loose. So she's and they're not from Oklahoma. But yeah, she's
Right.
she's completely free now.
Good.
So
Well,
I don't have anything to
Dave has those one-time schizophrenic
events all the time?
once a week.
Yeah.
One time a week.
Yeah.
Feel better, Eddie?
Yeah.
All right, Kevin, we're gonna take
Kevin,
a break.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to next time for your next book, your sequel.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't do it,
Next roundup,
or
coming up.
especially if you didn't do it.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Seriously, we appreciate it. God bless.